Workers in the Arctic are digging deep inside a frozen cave when they suddenly find something trapped in the ice. They cut out a large block to free it, and a helicopter transports it to a lab. The scientists quickly send a fax to the excavation company, announcing an important archaeological discovery and requesting a halt to the drilling. They also ask for a specialist to examine the ice block's contents. Before moving forward, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It will help us keep bringing your favorite movie recaps. Later, anthropologist Stanley arrives at the lab. He's an expert on Arctic history and Eskimo culture. The team introduces him to Dr. Diane and the other scientists, who believe the ice contains a prehistoric animal. They recall how the Russians discovered a mammoth with viable cells in 1898, raising their expectations for this find. The team carefully uses a laser to cut the ice block layer by layer, trying to avoid damaging the creature. To their shock, they discover the being inside isn't an animal, it's a Neanderthal. Stanley studies the figure and concludes it's a hunter who lived 20,000 to 40,000 years ago. As he prepares to examine it more closely, Diane informs him that their plan is to cut the caveman into pieces and send the samples to top research centers worldwide. The scientists thaw the caveman, remove his clothes and tools, and start taking tissue samples. They give him a bypass and monitor his brain with electrodes. Their tests reveal that the Neanderthal cells and organs are in perfect condition. Diane suggests that ancient humans had cryoprotectants, special cells that prevent crystallization. During the tests, the scientists are shocked to detect light brain activity from the Neanderthal. They decide to revive him, intubate him, and use a defibrillator until they find a strong heartbeat. Once stable, they remove the intubation, and the Neanderthal begins to wake up. Confused by his surroundings, noises, and the masked faces, he panics. Stanley removes his mask, and the caveman calms down when he sees a human face. This allows the team to sedate him with an injection. The group then discusses the caveman's future, already imagining a Nobel Prize. The Arctic team aims to develop a cryoprotectant to freeze cancer patients and revive them when a cure is found. With the Neanderthal, they hope to discover a way to freeze people and achieve immortality. Stanley objects, arguing that humans shouldn't live forever and that overpopulation is already a problem. His concerns are dismissed, and the scientists agree to keep the Neanderthal's existence a secret to prevent him from becoming a celebrity. Stanley says the caveman should be studied in a natural environment to learn more about prehistoric times. After begging the team, he convinces them to give him 2 weeks for his research. The team sets up a special vivarium and places the Neanderthal inside. When the caveman wakes up, he recognizes the environment and resumes his routine. He drinks berry juice to quench his thirst and scares a bird away to steal its eggs. In the evening, he starts a fire with stones and cooks his food. Every morning, he washes under a waterfall before hunting with a spear he crafts himself. One day, he makes noises that attract a wild boar. The boar charges at him, but the caveman dodges, causing it to get stuck between rocks, making it easy for him to kill. Later, while fishing, he discovers a hose. Curious, he sniffs, licks, and pulls it from the ground until he finds a metal door. He shakes the door until it opens, prompting the scientist to shut a second door to stop him from entering. Creatures in the lab roar, and the scientists create loud noises to scare the caveman away. Angry, the Neanderthal climbs the waterfall and finds the machine powering it. He screams and tries to destroy the machine, hitting the wall in frustration. A scientist enters the vivarium and shoots him with a tranquilizer dart. They place him on a stretcher and take him to the operating room to collect samples as planned. The shape of the scars and gestures make Stanley think they mean bird. Charlie steals Stanley's cross necklace, bites it, and starts repeating words while gesturing with his hands. Stanley tries to understand, but can't figure out what Charlie is saying. The next day, linguist Mabel arrives, and Stanley shows her the recording of his conversation with Charlie. However, she needs more to fully interpret his language. Stanley begins spending time with Charlie, learning simple words like rock, frog, and bone. In return, Charlie shares his food, and Stanley teaches him basic English words. Mabel observes everything through the cameras and is impressed by Charlie's large vocabulary. One night, as they sit by the fire, Stanley sings a song. Charlie enjoys it and encourages him to keep singing. While playing with leftover bones from his meal, Charlie makes noises to join in the singing. Later, the scientists put Charlie to sleep again to take more samples and run a new experiment. They place him in a special low-temperature chamber, hoping to activate cryoprotectants and make extraction easier. Stanley protests, arguing that they're killing Charlie and treating him like a lab rat. When Charlie's heartbeat slows dangerously, the scientists have no choice but to remove him from the chamber. Back in the vivarium, Charlie yells angrily at Stanley, upset about the experiments and his new scars. Suddenly, Charlie pretends to attack Stanley, striking the ground with his spear before pointing it at his own chest. He asks Stanley to help him end his life, but Stanley refuses. After a tense struggle, Stanley leaves the vivarium. Stanley privately asks Diane for help. He feels all the studies are slowly pushing Charlie away, causing them to lose contact with him. Stanley wants Diane to visit the vivarium with him, hoping a woman's presence might calm Charlie down. Inside the vivarium, they find Charlie with wounded hands, using rock powder to draw a bird from his scars on the ground. Diane feels nervous and becomes scared when Charlie immediately runs to her for a closer look. After sniffing her, he shares his food, made of bugs, with Diane. To avoid offending him, she reluctantly eats it. Charlie starts touching Diane, acting friendly at first but then attempting to look at her groin. Stanley quickly intervenes, and the two men yell at each other. To make Charlie back off, Stanley uses the Neanderthal word for mine. Charlie then brings objects from his cave, offering them to exchange for Diane. Stanley refuses, leaving Charlie visibly upset. He begins repeating the same words while staring at Diane. When Mabel analyzes his behavior, she believes she's discovered Charlie's word for woman, but there's more she doesn't understand. Stanley and Diane encourage Charlie to explain the words. He draws on the ground, revealing he once had a wife and children. Charlie starts running around, repeating the words, and Diane realizes he's asking where his family is. The emotional moment is interrupted when a helicopter appears above the facility. Charlie spots it through the glass ceiling and panics. He climbs the rocks, shouting Beta, his word for bird. The scientists order the helicopter to leave, but Charlie remains agitated. He reaches the top of the vivarium and keeps screaming Beta at the ceiling. Later, Stanley visits a tribe of Eskimos and shares the words he heard from Charlie. The group recognizes the words. Excited, Stanley rushes back to the lab to tell Diane about his discovery. He explains that Beta refers to Sedna, a legendary bird that acts as God's messenger, deciding whether people go to heaven or hell based on their behavior. Stanley theorizes that Charlie's tribe went extinct when the magnetic pole flipped, killing all the animals. Charlie likely saw this as God's punishment and went on a dream walk, offering himself to Sedna in exchange for the animal's return. Now, Charlie believes the helicopter is Sedna, so calming him down seems impossible. 34 hours later, Charlie wears all his clothes, tools, and trinkets that Stanley gave him. He decorates his skin with crushed berries as paint and never stops chanting, clearly waiting for his god to return. Whenever Stanley enters the vivarium, Charlie hides and refuses to communicate. One afternoon, Charlie climbs the stairs. After watching Stanley press the button so many times, he knows what to do. He enters the lab, sneaks around carefully, and avoids being seen. In an empty corridor, he finds a mirror and growls at his reflection. Thinking it's another man challenging him, Charlie breaks the mirror with his spear. Suddenly, he hears a voice through the speakers and panics. He runs through the corridor in fear until he reaches the room with the lab animals. Charlie checks out the bird, but the bear growls, so he keeps moving. When he tries to take the next corridor, he crashes into the glass doors. He quickly tries again, and the doors open automatically, letting him enter another room. A vehicle's movement scares him, so he hides behind a copy machine. Charlie accidentally activates the machine, panics, and runs. Startled by the elevator, he rushes into a lab and breaks a jar of acid, which burns his hand slightly. Then the scientists turn off the lights, and Charlie panics even more. He climbs onto the furniture, but keeps slipping and breaking equipment. A scientist hears the noise, enters the room, and turns the lights back on. Startled again, Charlie attacks and kills the scientist with his spear. Alarmed by the sound of the alarm, Charlie starts running. He bursts through a random door and finds a tunnel that gets colder as he moves forward. When he reaches the fire exit, he rushes through it and finally gets outside. Spotting a helicopter, he chases after it, but the pilot knocks him out with the helicopter skis. The scientists arrive, rescue Charlie, and take him back inside. Later, they examine his x-rays, confirming he has no broken bones or head injuries. Furious with Stanley, they blame his research for their colleague's death. They declare the experiments over and decide to transfer Charlie to another facility. Stanley argues that Charlie will die if kept in a cage, but they ignore him. Determined, Stanley secretly makes a deal with the guard at the door. Stanley enters the vivarium with a bunch of furs. He wraps Charlie in the furs to protect him from the cold, then takes him out for a walk. The scientists notice their absence and follow their footprints in the snow to find them. As Stanley and Charlie continue, ice shelves collapse and a crevasse suddenly opens, separating them. When a helicopter finally arrives, Charlie excitedly yells "Beta" and jumps, grabbing onto the helicopter skis. He happily chants during the flight, but when one of the pilots tries to reach for him, Charlie lets go of the skis. He glides for a few miles in good spirits before meeting his end. And that's how the movie ends. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.